is that if you've got a business that is doing good, that has a strong purpose, that is ethical, then survival is ethical. You know, and you've got to strike that balance between being the most ethical business in the entire universe, but your P&L is negative and you're not around in a year's time, versus maybe having to make some hard choices right now, so that you can be around and be doing the right thing in 2-5 years' time, once we are out of this horrible period of consumer misery, essentially. This will end. People are going to come out of this. People are going to have money to spend again one day. There's going to be sunlit uplands. There is going to be some kind of, revival. Actually, things may look a lot different to how they look now, but surviving and getting through the next however long is absolutely worth focusing on. And I think we'll think and talk about how to do that and how to do it in the right way. I suppose I've got a couple of things to think about. One is, this is absolutely, whether you're an ethical marketer or an unethical marketer or a downright evil marketer, these times where consumers are more demanding, have got less money to spend, are maybe making fairly harsh prioritized choices themselves, we've got to lean into that and see that as an inspiration to raise our game. This is not about going, oh my goodness, everything's horrible, I've got no budget. Actually, it's got to be a provocation to us to be better marketeers and do things better. And you know what? That might mean doing less, but it's about not being average. And I think that is absolutely what can make all of us come out of this horrible period as better marketers. A lot of people in the industry now maybe didn't even go through the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, which in some ways, in some industries, people were fairly insulated from. I think this is totally different. This is going to hit everybody. So this is a great learning curve and a great training ground if you can see it that way. And I suppose what I would say as well to add to that is being ethical is it's not a substitute for good marketing. It doesn't get you out of jail free on being able to do good marketing. Yes, it absolutely can be part of good marketing, but you've got to do all the other stuff brilliantly as well, potentially on a shoestring. So either you can go and cry in a corner, and I really apologize if anybody's crying into their lunch at this point, but you can see it also as a kind of great adventure and a kind of how do you grab and lean into that uncertainty, and how can you raise your game? And I suppose thinking about it from I
think we'll enjoy the fruits of it as well.
Was that
We'll find a way to mute.
That's all right. I don't know who it is. Wasn't sure if it was a very, very useful comment. Where was I? Oh yes. So I guess 3 things that are going to help. One is absolutely about prioritization, and maybe ethically you've got to make some hard choices between 1, 2, 3 different things that you want to do. And I know we've chatted about this before as an organization, kind of what if you can do ethical sourcing or packaging, or what are those choices that you in an ideal world would love to do all of them. Actually, what is the one thing that is important to consumers and that makes the most ethical impact? And if that's the only thing you do that and be really clear on what that is. And I think that probably comes back to this idea of purpose and even purpose upgrade. What is that if you're going to do one thing really, really well? And if you have to forget about some other things, temporarily, that's a hard choice to make, but it may be one that you need to lean into. What's going to make the biggest impact to your consumers? What's going to make the biggest impact on the planet? And making sure, and this goes back to my idea about not being average, but you're using that budget as effectively as you possibly can, and thinking about that holistically. Don't think about advertising versus packaging versus, all these things have got to be seen as one, and how are you going to use that most effectively? I suppose the second thing is about communication and transparency, because consumers, are potentially looking a bit harder into what you do. or a little bit more distracted. But the one thing that as an ethical business you've got going for you is going to be trust. And transparency is a huge part of that. And if you are making some of these choices, if you are having to make some trade-offs, don't try and hide it. Make sure that you aren't inadvertently kind of, trying to sneak something under the radar, because if people notice, and often the people who've got, are in that mindset of, I am prepared to spend a bit more on ethical products, on ethical services, on ethical businesses, on charities, are going to be the people who are looking a little bit more carefully than your average person. So transparency is really key. And, nobody's perfect. No one's expecting you to be perfect. Everyone knows times are tough. Just don't do sneaky stuff, because people will notice and that trust will be gone. And I suppose that then leads into my last point, and then I'll shut up and let everybody else chip in, is that play the long game. As I was saying, people are going to have money again one day. What are you doing between now and one day that is going to make them choose you? And Paul, Nana and I were chatting about this last week, and if you think back even to the Second World War, which was before all of us, brands like Bon Maman and Marks and Spencer's were doing good things, not for the commercial kind of good of it. They were doing it because it was the right thing to do. Bon Maman, Paul tells the story much better than me, but they were transporting Jews out of Europe. Marks and Spencer's, probably not quite as dramatic, but they were setting up soup kitchens, they were designing utility clothing, they were doing all this stuff. And do you know what? That becomes almost hereditary. I had no idea why my grandmother was so passionate about Marks and Spencer's and why she passed that down to my mum and probably me. But when you unpick the story, then you realise that actually, brands that are doing the right thing, either by positively doing the right thing for people, altruistically, or being right, have got a huge opportunity in the long term. And those kind of associations and things that you're building now will help, but you've got to survive in order to get the payoff on that. So there is that real balance to take. And I suppose it's that, how can you help people? Even if that's as simple as make them laugh. Actually, making people laugh right now is actually no bad thing to do. People don't have enough of that. You open up the Guardian website and go, oh, holy crap, no, I'm switching that off again. That's no fun. What can you do with kind of packaging or pricing architecture that actually maybe lets people have a little bit of luxury, or sort of buy into a reduced version of what you're doing in the short term? Yes, you're not going to do great things for your P&L, but actually they're going to keep people engaged long term. So lots and lots of things. And I suppose they would be the three things that I was, I'll bring my ramblings to a close, but they'd be my three things: prioritization, communication, and just playing that long game. And to play that long game, you've got to survive. I hope that sparked a few thoughts. I suppose it would be really good to get people's reflections on that. And I've got a couple of questions to throw at you.